Hey everybody, we're doing some location shooting. So right now we are in my beautiful car, nicknamed Matilda. She has a personality of her own, so if the video gets all wonky, it's her fault. Um, well, I chose to film here because I've got all of these articles to share with you about drivers and driving, and passengers and what they can do, as well as parents and that sort of thing. Teachers love the idea of community and the community taking a part in teaching. Right here, we have the state must focus on teen passenger safety. Distractions must be limited. And 3 different authors in the Hartford Courant wrote about this. They say that susceptible teens are driving inexperience and poor impulse control. So if you hear a text like I just heard in my phone, teens are more willing to answer that text while driving than ignore it, wait until they park, and answer it accordingly. Passengers are not just along for the ride. That trip, if the car is driven unsafely, could be deadly. Among young drivers, there's clearly different levels of maturity and of parental involvement. We also know that the brain doesn't fully develop until age 25. This means teenage drivers and their young passengers do not fully understand the risky behavior they exhibit in automobiles. And just to prove that fact, the part of the brain that you're waiting the longest to be developed is the frontal lobe. The frontal lobe is responsible for rational thinking and executive functioning where it needs to be. So, in other words, put off the texting or put off this or that. Think reasonably. This article is so great because it highlights 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 things that drivers and passengers can do in order to ensure a safe drive. Item 1. Passengers need to know who is driving their teen and the extent of his or her driving experience. That is really important. If they have little experience, you might want to be a hard parent and say, no thank you. Parents need to continuously monitor and guide their teens' driving activity and limit their travel to purposeful driving. You tell me where you're going and why you're going there. This is for teens only. I'm not saying somebody who is an adult and their parents say, this is it. No. Teens who are inexperienced drivers, you tell me where you're going. Are you going to school? Good. What route you're taking? How long it'll take you to get there? Are you bringing anybody else? There are laws against certain passengers that you can have. Communities and high schools should consider a voluntary vehicle decal program that identifies novice drivers and helps police spot vehicles that should not have passengers. I don't think anybody would volunteer for this unless they're the safe drivers or the parents are requiring this decal. And then how will it work? Will it have the year on it? So I'm a little skeptic of this idea. Parents must be aware that the driver's education is not the panacea for making teens safer drivers. So education in the classroom, great, fine, whatever. The hours on the road is important, and go ahead, be in the car with them, teach them longer than what the state is requiring. They'll appreciate it in the long run. Prosecutors and courts should consider starting a required passenger education and awareness program, like they exist for drunk driving. I think this is a great idea. A lot of teens nowadays, the millennials, will accept this because it's important to them to be safe. I remember in high school we had red cement right during prom time. Red cement is completely gory, and it shows what inexperienced drivers, drunk drivers, partying kids, too many distractions in the car can be affected by, and even motorcycle driving. I can't get the image of all that blood on the pavement out of my mind. Pedestrians, family physicians, and other healthcare professionals need to stress both driver and passenger safety during wellness visits and encourage the use of parent-teen driving contracts. I'll get more into the parent-teen driver contracts later. And police need to enforce Connecticut's graduated driver's license laws. I hated the laws because when I got my license, I didn't get it until I was 17, even though I started driving when I was 15. And I was so worried that my parents would not give me a chance to drive the car alone until after I was 18, and the law says that, and the law was going to be changed to 18. So I really hated that idea, and I was fighting them tooth and nail on it. But that's my personal experience, and I don't want that to color yours. So think about your teens, but try to be respectful of them. They're people too. On October 22nd, I know this is a long time ago, they had a week about empowering teens for Driver Safety Week. And this article is basically just saying some facts that are kind of interesting if you didn't know them before. When you're driving, it's the driver's responsibility, but it's also the passenger's responsibility to make sure the driver knows what they're doing. I've opened up my mouth even last night telling my dad, there's a stop sign there, you need to turn your lights on, don't forget this, don't forget that, don't play chicken with other drivers even if it's fun. And mile for mile, teens are involved in 3 times as many crashes as other drivers. This is from David Shapiro, a trauma and critical care doctor at St. Francis Hospital and Medical Center in Hartford. So, you know that it's accurate because a doctor is saying this from his own statistics that he's taken while on the job. And 3 times as many crashes is quite alarming in my opinion. The Reminder News has come out with 2 weeks of articles by the same author discussing the detrimental effects of poor driving. The first time, October 24th, with parent Tim Hollister, who lost his son in a teenage driving accident, has written a book to help other parents learn more about protecting their teen drivers. His son had had his license for only 11 months, and that seems like a lot to kids, 11 months. Like, it's almost a year. We're experienced drivers. That's what they think. It's important for us to know what the teens think. He went out on an unauthorized joyride, and the crash was the result of being over the speed limit on a road that he did not know. His inexperience with how to handle a skid contributed to the accident that eventually killed him. Hollister, the parent, thought he had done everything he was supposed to do to prepare his son to drive, including giving him more than the required hours on the road instruction, but still, his son was dead. That's extremely sad, and it makes parents make the assumption that teen drivers will start on a day, one, that they are eligible, so immediately at age 16. And his book, Not So Fast, Parenting Your Teens Through the Dangers of Driving, talks about the various ways in which we can avoid these things. Like, first, to understand the difference between purposeful driving and joyriding. Joyriding, you don't have a place to go. You just want to go, and for the sake of having your freedom. Freedom is great. I love it. We're Americans, but we have to be responsible with our freedom. My dad always says, if you're in a crowded movie theater and you yell fire, or more recently in a crowded theater and yell gunman, it leads to trampling and scary things. So we need to be aware of our responsibility. A destination is a specific route to take, a reason to be there on time, and I like how Hollister puts it. I'm going to quote right from the article. If you're late for work, the teen will lose pay. If you're late to practice, the teen may not be allowed to play in the next game. Joyriding is multiple teens in a car with no particular destination, where we see misconduct, peer pressure, and risk-taking. Like I was saying, the fast driving, the reckless driving, swerving in and out of lanes, maybe even texting, listening to loud music, whatever else can happen in the car. And I know whatever else can happen in the car. Fatigue is the hardest factor for parents to determine. So, I have a boyfriend who lives an hour away from me. And if I leave his house after 10 p.m., I'm subject to getting fatigued on the road. That means I won't get home until 11, and if I have work the next morning or class or what have you, it's hard to do. So, I make a rule for myself, 9:30 to 10 o'clock max. When I've gone later, and this is years ago, so don't arrest me for this, when I've gone later, I've noticed myself closing my eyes and jerking myself up, closing my eyes and jerking myself up. I've noticed myself swerving, or starting to swerve, and luckily at the hours I started to swerve, there were no cars on the road, and it was 2-3 o'clock in the morning. But that doesn't mean that my life isn't important, so I need to be wary of that. And tightened up restrictions and imposed stricter penalties for disobeying the laws. Parents are now required to attend safety classes with their teens to learn about the dangers teen drivers face. Roadway features and intersections are taken into account when setting speed limits to give drivers time to react. I think that's the most important part of the article. If there's a purpose for that speed limit, you need to know the purpose. And then maybe you'll be more akin to following those rules. They're not just set standards.